Hello, and welcome to the No-BS Homeowners live series, where we are going beyond the closing day and talking about everything that comes with owning a home, from maintenance and budgeting to building equity and protecting your investment. So, join me today and let's get started. So, imagine if I asked 10 homeowners what they wanted to change about their house. Guess what? I'd probably get about 10 different answers, if not more. A new kitchen, a bigger deck, an updated bathroom, new flooring. But tonight, the question that we're answering is different. The question that we're going to be answering is which projects are actually worth your money, not just what you want to do. So let's talk about the renovations that actually pay off and that actually add value, because the best renovation isn't always the most expensive one. All right. So let's talk about the three types of value. I think homeowners often make a mistake that they assume that every renovation has to make money. That's not really true. We need to take into account and look at the three different values of renovations and the return on them. So, probably the most obvious one is return on investment. How much money are you going to recover when you sell your property in the future? Can you make your money back by putting money into your house? Well, the answer we'll talk about later is it depends. But that's the first value we want to kind of evaluate when we're looking at renovations. The next one would be lifestyle value. Does it actually improve your everyday life? Is this something that benefits you every single day? Because there is value in those things. And then resale appeal. So, is there value in the resale of this? Will future buyers appreciate what you've done and potentially pay more for that? So, all of these things are value. And we have to evaluate not just on, hey, am I going to get my money back out of this? Because there really is some value and convenience in your daily life. And as long as it helps with the resale, congratulations, go for it. But an example of this would be like a backyard patio. You might not get all of the money you put into your outdoor patio with the nice brick and the outdoor kitchen. But if you spend every single night during the summer out there with your family, there's a lot of value in that. And that is in memories and just like the use of your space. So we have to be able to evaluate our renovations on kind of three scopes, because it doesn't always have to have the biggest return on investment to be worth doing if it's something that you value in your life. Sometimes it just needs to make you happy. But let's talk about some of the renovations that are really the biggest bang for your buck. These are projects that generally provide a pretty good balance of cost and value. And I will tell you, or I kind of want to preempt some of this, a lot of these things can be done right before you sell, and aren't necessarily things that are really going to increase your personal value or your lifestyle value. But these are things that are pretty reasonably priced, but do tend to have a pretty good impact when you are selling. So the first one would be fresh paint. So if you're going to paint your house anyway, like pretty much every buyer does anyway, just be aware that if you have to sell in the next couple of years, maybe you shouldn't be painting everything that like bright red or bright purple, those very specific colors. Those don't typically sell as well. That's very personalized. But when you're either getting ready to sell or you're thinking long term, like, hey, I'm probably not going to be here all that long, maybe don't do this specific customization and just go with the neutrals. Be warned, we do tend to go between gray and beige like every couple of years. Like right now, I would say we're kind of leaning more towards beige again, and the gray is kind of cycling its way out. So, depending on how long you're owning your home, if you paint it all gray in the gray time, and then, well, the beige time comes along, you might have to repaint your home again. So, just kind of keep that in mind. But like on average, we're looking at like $2,000 to $6,000, depending on the size of your house. It could obviously get more than that. But this is honestly one of the easiest and best investments you can make when trying to do a renovation for return on investment. It just it just helps the home feel fresh and it helps it feel more move-in ready. So again, if you want to do your own little customization and you plan to live there for 20 years, go for it. But if you have to sell in the next 2 years, probably keep it pretty simple. Another thing would be a garage door. If you have an old dented garage door or lots of scratches on it, just replacing that actually has a really pretty quite a good return, just because it improves the curb appeal and really brings people into the home um, in order to sell it later. I can attest personally. We did this on our house actually this year. We had just kind of some ugly doors, and it really cleaned up the exterior. Still need to clean up some weeds, but it was pretty affordable for what we needed. I mean, I think ours costs like $3,000 because we have two single stall garage doors on a double garage. Um, but I would say the average cost is anywhere from like 2 to 5,000. And if you don't plan on living there very long, you don't need to go bougie and get like the super fancy, like hardcore insulated ones. The exterior is the biggest part. Front door replacement kind of goes along with that exterior curb appeal. They can be pretty cheap or they can get really expensive depending on what you do, like $500 to like 8 grand if you want to do like real bad and bougie. Um, but it's a pretty small project that can make a big deal, or even just painting the front door. If you got some like old bubbling paint like we do on ours from when we painted, um, maybe consider repainting that to just give it that nice fresh appeal. And then we typically always say, like, long term, if you're going to be doing renovations, you want to focus on the kitchen and the bathroom or the kitchen and the bathrooms, because that is where people tend to bring the most value. Now, keep in mind, bring the most value does not mean it's going to automatically bring more than what you put into it. That's not typically the case, especially if you're doing a full kitchen renovation. So typically, if you can just do like a refresh and be happy living that way and be happy just in general with it, that's typically where you're going to get a better return on your investment. So don't think of like tearing out all the cabinets, redoing everything. Think like painting the cabinets, doing some new hardware, replacing the faucet or the old sink. Old sinks are so dirty and gross. If you can replace that sink, that goes a long, long way. Updating some lighting, maybe adding a backsplash if you don't have one. Be careful with the backsplash. That can be very style specific. So again, neutral is your goal. Um, and the trends go in and out with that. So just be careful with that one if you're maybe not worried about it for yourself, but when you're getting ready to sell, maybe you could consider a backsplash for what's trending at that time. But if you can keep that cost low and not have to do a full gut renovation on the kitchen, I mean, you can spend anywhere from like $2,000 for new countertops up to 15 grand or more. It really depends on the size of your kitchen, but typically you're getting a much better return if you're just doing more of a refresh than a full remodel. And then additionally, same thing with the bathrooms. Like if you don't have to completely gut and tear out, like you're going to save a lot more money. But new paint, a new vanity, an updated mirror, lighting, some of the like fixtures that go with it, and in general, a new toilet all goes a long way. But like tearing out subfloor and doing all of that stuff, replacing a tub with a shower or something like that, that's where it gets really expensive. But if you can just do the refresh and call things, make them just look a little prettier, like spending somewhere between $2,000 and $10,000, you tend to see a better return on your investment with just a refresh. Uh, but again, if you are a person that, you have no use for a tub and you've got 3 tubs in your house, yeah, you might spend the extra money and change that tub into a shower. And, that's a lifestyle choice in addition to, an ROI choice. So another thing would be landscaping. Landscaping is probably one of the cheapest, but has the biggest impact. Cheapest because you can do a lot of it yourself, whether that's putting in fresh mulch, putting in new flowers, power washing the exterior, just trimming up some brush and bushes, lighting, little outdoor solar lighting can go a long way, really like clean up the place. And just a few $100s can really go far on changing and making a big bang for your buck on some of your renovations. And then other ones, this is definitely more lifestyle, would be energy efficiency. So that's like talking about putting in more insulation, weather sealing, getting a smart thermostat, just making sure your HVAC system is, running efficiently, or, potentially getting a new HVAC system. These, I will tell you, buyers are happy when they are updated and thought, you know, some thought has been put into these, or like, a new furnace is obviously a benefit. But I'll tell you, it's not the thing that is selling the house. If it's, if they're comparing two properties that are exactly the same and one has a newer furnace and one doesn't, yeah, they're going to take the one with the newer furnace. But in most cases, these are kind of like secondary thoughts. So this is definitely more of a lifestyle situation for you. But if you could reduce your bills long term and you plan to be there forever, it might be worth getting that new higher efficient furnace, or doing some of this weather sealing. I know the return on investment is not as good on this one, but the lifestyle return on this one can be really quite nice. But overall, you don't have to spend $100,000 to make your home feel like it's like worth $100,000 more. And in fact, you're probably going to spend more than you're going to get out of it. Sorry, that's just kind of how it is. Unless you're living there long term, then appreciation is going to help you, but you have to continue to maintain your house. But you just want to be able to take in kind of the cost versus the payoff on these. So, like, if you look at paint, it's pretty low cost, but it has a huge impact when you sell. A garage door, sort of expensive, but has been shown to have a great return on investment. It really cleans up, helps bring people in. A kitchen refresh, if you keep it modest, then it has a strong appeal later. Same with the bathroom. And we've kind of already talked about this stuff, so I'm not going to dig too much, but you just have to be able to look at the cost versus the payoff in the big scheme of things, and look at the return that you're actually trying to get, whether that's the return on investment, your lifestyle return, and so forth. Okay, now, when we're talking about renovations, it is so fun to pretend you're in HGTV and make it all cutesy and blah, blah, blah. But here's the problem. If you have serious problems in your house, don't remodel over a problem. Focus on the things that need fixed first. Safety obviously is first. If you've got some outlets that need grounded, that probably should be your top priority. I know it's not a very sexy fix, but your safety is. And then comes structure. So make sure that everything is good. A lot of times structure is actually in landscaping, which has a high return on investment, because you want to keep water away from the house. If you're not keeping water away from the house, you're putting a lot of faith in your structural integrity and the foundation. And then maintenance would be the next priority. Make sure you're keeping the house in good shape. And then once you have all those things checked off and have put your money towards those, then you can talk about cosmetic updates. Because I will tell you, when I am showing a house to a buyer and we look around and they've got like some cute aesthetic-y things that looked really great on the photos, but then you look around and there is no maintenance done on anything else, it just looks like lipstick on a pig, and it is a big red flag and makes people really hesitant, and a lot of them say goodbye. So really focus on the things that actually make a difference to the quality of the home. Like, fix the leak in the sink before you're putting up a backsplash, because soon enough that leak in the sink is going to completely rot out the floor, and then you're going to be, your backsplash is cool, but the utility of your kitchen is trash. Address the foundation before you do the flooring, especially if it's going to be shifting, because you might shift your new flooring that you put in too. But protect the house before you decorate the house is kind of what I'm trying to get to. Is you want to make sure that the house is in good shape before you go all fancy with it, because buyers really do notice poor maintenance, and it really shows. So always look at that prioritization list before you're jumping into things. And I know we all love a good Pinterest weekend where we are going to do a project that we found on Pinterest. But if it's going to start adding up really to a really big budget line, maybe start with the things that actually need done. Because paint can cover old paint, but it doesn't fix a leaking roof. So before you start spending money, I have some suggestions. Talk with your realtor. If you're concerned about reselling in the near future, talk with your realtor. Have them look over some comps in the area, see like what is bringing in more value. Like, are all the comps in the area having old, outdated kitchens, but you're like, oh, I have to have this updated kitchen because it's going to bring me more money? You might not need to spend the money. Or, if you want to put in that outdoor kitchen, but nothing else is, nothing else has that, you're probably overbuilding for the neighborhood and you're probably not going to see a return on your money on that. You just want to make sure the money that you're putting in is worth it, again, on the return on investment and the lifestyle, if you're expecting to get that back. And then when you are shopping around or doing renovations, get multiple bids. Some contractors, if you don't know, if they are really busy and don't need the work, they will just bid you an outrageous number. And if you take it, congratulations, they just got a heck of a bonus. So make sure you get multiple bids. You don't know if they're super busy or not, but get those different bids, compare them, see if you can, if you have one that you prefer, say, hey, would you price match this other one that I've got? It's an open negotiation. So make sure you're doing that and checking the pricing. And then check if there's permits required. Like if you're going to add another bedroom, you typically have to pull a permit to put in an egress window if it's in the basement. You just need to make sure that what you're doing is up to code. So when you go to sell later, you don't have to deal with that situation. And then budget for surprises. Whenever we're flipping properties, we always build in at least a 10% overage, but let's be honest, it's always more than that. So make sure you're budgeting for some surprises and build in some extra money, especially if you're going to DIY it. You're going to be like buying probably tools. You're probably not quite estimating the cost correctly. And I mean, right now with gas prices, you're going to be paying a pretty penny in gas just to get back and forth to Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever. And then think about your timeline. When do you need this renovation done? Make sure that it all fits in your plans, and that, if you are doing it yourself, plan to extend that timeline a lot. Like, we redid our bathroom completely by ourselves, and what we thought would take a couple of weeks took a whole year. So obviously was not our top priority, but just really think about your timeline and things when you're doing renovations. And sometimes it's worth asking, am I doing this renovation for myself or am I doing it for the next buyer? Because sometimes people will renovate their home all beautiful and finally exactly how they want it. And then they're like, well, I'm actually moving for a job. And so they don't even get to enjoy it. So make sure that you are doing the renovations for yourself. But if you are having to sell, then definitely consider the return on investment as well. And then if you know my husband and I, we always say, measure once, cut twice. But in renovations, you really should measure twice, remodel once. So really look at the situation and look at what it is your goals are, so that way you don't have to do this again. And one thing I do want to mention, because this has come up, is if you're doing renovations and then you're going to sell the house, please keep in mind when you did the renovations. Like, we have some older people that, renovated the house in the 90s and they think now it's 2026 that is still considered renovated. No. Politely no. So when you're doing these renovations, if you are planning to sell years and years and years down the road, just because you did it once doesn't mean that it's still completely renovated for when you go and sell. So you may have to do it again to keep up with the times, to keep up with the property. So just keep that in mind when you're putting in money for renovations. But the goal is not to have the fanciest house on the block. The goal is to have a house that you enjoy, that works for you, and retains its value. So I hope that this has been helpful for you. And if you're thinking about remodeling or wondering what projects makes the most sense for you and your goals, reach out. I'm happy to connect with you, or happy to connect you with a realtor in your area, so that way you can evaluate what renovations are best for you. But thank you so much for joining me for the No-BS Homeowners live series, again, where we are going beyond the closing day and talking about everything that comes with owning a home, from maintenance and budgeting to building equity and protecting your investment. Next week, we are going to be doing a $100 homeowner challenge. So we're going to put some of this knowledge and information to the test and see what kind of added benefits to our home we can do for just $100. Well, I will see you next week, and thanks for tuning in.